Hey everyone, welcome to Holistic Health. I am your host, Jeff Hull, and you will be seeing my wife, Kamale Hull, doing videos as well. We are today sitting with Dr. May, who's a naturopathic doctor here in Fairbanks, Alaska. And Dr. May, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm a naturopathic doctor. I've been practicing for about 10 years, mostly in primary care, but now the last few years I've kind of shifted more towards endocrine disorders, so hypothyroid, hormone dysfunction, menopause, low T in guys, and then just this kind of pushing more into performance, and improving performance in athletes and people. The whole anti-aging sort of phenomenon that's come about in the last few years, like really trying to change gears to figure out like how can we all perform better? How do we not only prevent disease and survive, but really push our performance and thrive, more. That's basically it.
Cool. So today we're going to talk a little bit about a subject that I know a lot of people are interested in, and I mean, in my opinion, it's kind of taken the world by storm over the past couple of years, and that's intermittent fasting. And Dr. May knows a lot about intermittent fasting. He has patients on intermittent fasting protocols constantly, so I thought he'd be a really good expert to talk to on this situation. He knows the research, he knows the data, and he even intermittent fasts himself, so we'll get to dive in a little bit on maybe what Dr. May does and what his schedule looks like as well. So, I was going to say, if you have any questions about intermittent fasting, please feel free to send us a message, comment down below. We'd be more than happy to answer those for you in the near future. So, we're just going to talk about this in conversation piece. So, Dr. May, give us just a clear definition of intermittent fasting. What is intermittent fasting?
Yeah, so it's funny because intermittent fasting, we've done this since humans have been on Earth. We didn't call it intermittent fasting. It was just life, right? So sometimes food just wasn't abundant, and we might have to go days or sometimes weeks without food. And the better we could do that, the better we could adapt to that, the more likely we would survive. So, like over time, genetically, we've made those adjustments to be able to do that. But now we get into a sort of society of abundance where we have lots of chronic disease. So we're not worried so much about infectious disease, which is what most of the time that we've been on Earth as humans, we've had to really kind of watch, and that's what's limited our our time, our ability to stay alive. Like all the lifespan kind of stuff has been restricted by infectious disease. Well, now for modern societies, that's not the case. It's now chronic disease, and so we live in abundance all the time. So now we're starting to see like research come out on fasting, intermittent fasting, and how that can help us manage or reverse some of these chronic conditions. So basically, what it is you're just going without food for a period of time, and if you're going to go for 2 or 3 days, that's fasting. But if you want to try to implement or get the benefits of fasting in a shorter period of time more often, then we call it intermittent fasting, which is just a shorter period of fasting. Okay. So instead of 24 or 72 hours a week, now we're doing like 12 to 18 hours per day or a few days a week, that sort of thing.
Okay. So I know that there's a lot of different versions of intermittent fasting, and they often get put as like a 6-8, and they have these numbers, right? These ratio numbers of how long to fast versus how long your eating period is, right? I know that's what those numbers are. Yeah. But two questions for this I'm curious about is what would you say the best number is to do, and then two, why are there so many different numbers? Why are different numbers for specific things like disease prevention, longevity, weight loss? Are there specific numbers for specific things?
Yeah, I think some of that we're still trying to figure out and learn. And the two most common strategies are 18-6 and 5-2. So 5-2 is just where 2 days a week, typically non-consecutive days, you're trying to keep your calorie intake, at 300 to 500 calories or less per those 2 days. And then the other 5 days a week, you're just eating regularly. And then the 18-6 is where you're fasting 18 hours per day, and then you condense your feeding time into 6 hours. That's probably the most common strategy. It's the one that I try to implement myself. I think it's just an easier one for most people to try to figure out.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, there's a ton of strategies. Like I usually have patients start with just 12 hours, a day, and try to get to a point where they're doing that most days out of the week, if not like 5 to 6 days out of the week. And then once they've adapted to that, then we start trying to lengthen that time over time. So go to 13 or 14 hours or up to 18 and see how you do. And it's not a hard, fast rule. Like you don't have to absolutely stick with it. It's like I tell people to listen to their bodies. When you're trying to figure this thing out, there will be days, like still with me, I've been doing this for 3+ years now. And there's still days where I try to fast and, I get 14, 15 hours into it. I'm supposed to be going 18 hours. And I start getting super hungry or get a headache or, I start having these symptoms that, something's just not right. So I'll break my fast early that day and then just eat early. And that can be for a number of reasons. Whatever kind of stresses our bodies. If we didn't have a good night's sleep, if you're fighting off an infection or, there could be a number of reasons why you would get these symptoms. But sometimes it's just a matter of listening to your body and figuring out kind of what works for you. So that's always the trick here is when we get information, data, and trying to apply that data to individuals and not just as a kind of blanketed statement. So that's basically what naturopathic medicine or functional medicine is trying to apply some of these strategies and then tweaking them individually per person.
Okay. So I'm curious just to know what your opinion is on this. But in the US, it's gotten really big and popular all of a sudden, and a lot of people are talking about it, a lot of people are doing it, a lot of people are having success with it, some people aren't. With the American standard diet that most people follow, if you are following like this American standard diet, high processed foods, and your intermittent fasting, is that contradicting each other as far as like trying to get healthier with intermittent fasting?
Yeah, well, you're definitely not getting the best possible outcomes there, obviously. But it can blunt some of the effect of that poor diet. Because one, if you condense your eating time, your feeding time to 6 hours instead of spreading it out over 12 hours, then obviously you're just not going to be able to get the amount of calories that you would be able to normally in a 12-hour period. You'll get full, like you just won't be able to do it. So we tend to often see people eat less calories overall when they make this adjustment. And so you can get some of the benefits there. And then we see a little bit of a caloric restriction there too. So there's some benefit to that as well as far as longevity goes, decreasing inflammation, stimulating immune function. Like you can still get some of the benefits there, but obviously they're not going to get the most as if they were eating a whole food, plant-based, diet.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Yeah, there's always lots of contradicting information out there about nutrition and what's healthy, what's not healthy, and especially I feel like in America we just get very confused and overwhelmed with that information, and especially with even topics like this with intermittent fasting, like there's so much information out there to want like what's right, what's wrong. But I think like what you said, having like just plant-based foods, maybe a little bit of meat here and there, but having more of like, would you say almost like a paleo kind of diet where you're just eating wholesome, real food?
Yeah, that's just it. Like I like Michael Pollan's description of what to do. Eat real food, mostly plants. Okay. Like if you just really had to simplify it, do that. If you ate mostly plants, then you're not going to eat just by your process of elimination there. If you're eating a ton of plant, food, you're not going to eat as much animal products that are going to not typically be as good for you. So it's like, that's why I tell people, like, hey, let's make this simple. Like, let's just focus on trying to get you like 5 to 7 servings of fruits and vegetables in per day. If you're hitting that 7, servings a day, you're probably not going to be eating a lot of the other junk food and stuff like that, just because you're going to get it full. It's a lot of fiber, a lot of nutrients. You're going to tell your brain, hey, I'm good. So you're not going to fight that hunger issue that you would with other stuff. Things like, if you have a Big Mac, it's a ton of hundreds of calories there. You should be good, but a lot of people will still be hungry again an hour or 2 after they've consumed this huge amount of calories. And the reason for that is there are very little nutrients in that food. There are a lot of macronutrients like fats, proteins, and carbohydrates, but there's very few micronutrients like vitamins and minerals. And those are the things that help to trigger some of those hormones that have to do with hunger. So if you're not getting those nutrients in, your hunger hormones are still going to go crazy.
Right. Oh, that makes sense. So one thing, and I kind of want to address this, because I know there's some people that may be tuning in that like to work out, that might even be trying to enhance their athletic performance. And I personally know that there's some research out there showing that intermittent fasting may enhance athletic performance in some individuals. Can we touch on that a little bit about like how does intermittent fasting do that for somebody?
Yeah, so it's a tricky process too, just because, depends on how much we want to go into sort of the biochemistry here, but stimulating growth, like the mTOR pathway and all of that, versus trying to improve or sort of get these senescent cells and these kind of sort of bad old cells out by fasting. So all of this it's all about balance, like anything else would be. And with athletes, it's a little bit trickier because we know that with intermittent fasting, that's going to stimulate a pathway called AMPK, which has to do with decreasing inflammation. It has to do with like decreasing acetylation on histones inside the cell. But all of that helps to turn over old cells, right? So you get these old cells, we call them senescent cells. And when they get old, they just don't function the way that they're supposed to. Their proteins get all kind of folded on themselves, and then you're more likely for these cells to become more like tumor cells. And we see this. But if we're living in abundance all the time, then we see more of these senescent cells. So fasting is a way to stimulate autophagy, which some people may have heard at this point because it's kind of a common term being thrown around a lot. But autophagy is basically the opposite of that. So autophagy helps to clear out some of those and recycle those old cells so they're not as prevalent. So with athletes, we want to be in this growth phase so that they can build muscle. So they have to have some type of insulin there, because insulin is a growth hormone, right? That's stimulated by carbohydrates and glucose, right? But at the same time, having a period of fasting that helps them get rid of some of these old cells, decrease inflammation, help them repair. So here's the thing with fasting. Right now, most Americans live in abundance, right? So we go in the grocery store, there's food abundant, we can eat all day long, every day if we want to, and that's what most people do, right? We don't have periods where we refrain from that and allow our body to repair. So think of it as like money. So if the money is just flowing in, then our idea of how we're spending that money changes, right? We tend to buy more stuff. It's all about growth, right? Bigger, better cars, bigger houses, more money in the bank, we're investing more. It's all about growing stuff, right? And that's basically what happens when we're eating all the time. We get in a growth phase. So that's why you see bodybuilders eat every 2 hours and they're eating tons of protein, and that helps them to get bigger and build more muscle. But at the same time, some of these athletes can also be increasing their risk for some of these chronic diseases too. Like I see metabolic syndrome in bodybuilders, and so in diabetes in bodybuilders for that reason, if they're not really regulating themselves well. So we flip that and say, like right now, times are scarce. A lot of people are out of jobs. And so you start to really look at your budget more refinedly. You recycle more, you reuse more, you look at ways that you can kind of, cut it down and be very, very efficient with what money that you do have. And that's basically how autophagy works. Okay, but if food is scarce, resources are scarce, your cells get really good at reusing and recycling things. And that's what we want to see. We see by doing so, inflammation goes down, immune stimulation goes up. So this is another good way that, in times like this where we're trying to do as much as we can to prevent, getting this COVID-19. And if we do, we want a good, robust immune system to fight this thing off. Well, intermittent fasting could be potentially a way that we could do that. So with athletes, it's all about balance. So from the athletes I work with, I try to get them to do intermittent fasting, but also really be cautious or particular about how they feed during that little window. So for me, I exercise in the evening around 5:36. So I'll fast during the first part of the day, and I'll start eating about 1:30 or so. And so that first meal, I'll have good sources of protein and fats, especially. What that does is it helps kind of set the stage for your glucose, your blood sugar for the rest of the day. And that's, we know this through tons and tons of studies. Like, breakfast really is the most important meal of the day because it sets the stage for your blood sugar for the rest of the day. But breakfast doesn't have to be at 8 a.m. every day. It could be, it's just your first meal of the day. It's whatever meal you're breaking that fast, right? And that really is important. We know that people who start the day with more carbohydrates tend to eat more calories throughout the day too, as opposed to people who eat a higher protein or fat for their first meal. So I'll start with a good protein, fat, meal. And then about 2 hours before I'm going to go exercise, I'll have a higher carbohydrate meal, like have a sweet potato or something like that. So that you have the carbohydrates there to be able to have enough sugar available, glycogen stores to be able to work out intensely, because you're going to deplete those glycogen stores when you do exercise. And then having some carbohydrates after your exercise with protein as well in order to replenish that glycogen that you've used up during your exercise. So basically that's, you figure out what works for you, whether that's fasting first part of the day or fasting the last part of the day. Like, this is the beauty of it. You can figure it out based on your schedule, what works for you.
I've had a couple people ask me this question before, and so since we're talking about performance and exercise and stuff and intermittent fasting, would you ever recommend to anybody fasting after a workout, like doing your workout and then just fasting then? And if so, why?
Yeah, so you could, as long as you had some protein and a certain amount of carbohydrates within like the first, within like an hour of working out, then you're likely okay there. The idea there is to have some way of replenishing that glycogen that you've used up, and then having enough protein to stimulate that mTOR pathway so that you are growing some. You're going to need some insulin, response there, and sugar, carbohydrates, and proteins are going to be the thing that help to stimulate insulin. Right. So insulin's not a bad thing. We just don't want to stimulate it all day, every day. Then it becomes a bad thing. We want to stimulate it at the right time. So if you're trying to grow through, exercise, then you want some insulin surge, around that time, so that you are, increasing growth hormone and all those things that you need hormonally to build muscle like you want.
Gotcha. So that's probably like with me, for example, when I do intermittent fasting, if I just intermittent fast and I don't like exercise in the morning and I just like try to fast until 12 o'clock, I try to do like a 16-hour fast, my body actually holds on to fat, like it builds fat. But like if I wake up in the morning and I go work out fasted, and like the only thing I put on in my system is water and maybe a cup of coffee, because we know coffee doesn't break fast, right?
Right.
That's from what we know. So tell us a little bit about that. Like, what could be happening? Like, why would fasting, and which I guess, never mind, because you're talking about that mTOR pathway, is, so I'm assuming that if I work out fasted and then I have my first meal right after I work out, so we flip the previous question, right? And then I just continue my day. Then I would be stimulating that insulin response, right? To build muscle and burn fat there. Because now I've heard this, and I know a lot of people believe this or think this, and I know it's on the internet a lot, but like if we do go work out fasted and don't eat anything before we work out, is it true that our bodies will get into what they call the fat burning state of fasting?
Okay. Well, it all has to do with glycogen stores.
Okay.
So typically, most of us have enough glycogen stored in our liver for about 12 to 24 hours of fasting. So, which means that once your blood sugar starts to drop, your liver is going to dump that stored sugar. It's going to mobilize that stored glycogen into glucose so that you can use it in your bloodstream. And so, at about 12 hours for most people, we start to see, the ketone production to go up. And that's a key that your glycogen stores have started to deplete, and that you're starting to convert some of that fat into ketones as another source of energy.
So knowing ketones is a good way to know if I'm in a fasted state, right?
Right.
So I can just get ketone strips or something like that and test and see if I have elevated ketones, then clearly I'm typically in the first 12 hours we'll start to see ketones in the urine come out. Okay.
So if it's a short period of time, check your urine. It's a really easy urine strip and see if you've got any ketones. Once you start getting into more extending fast, like getting into that 18-hour plus fasting state, then you'll start to see levels of your ketones in your urine actually go down, but your ketones in your blood go up. So the beta hydroxybutyrate, that'll start going up. And that's when you really start getting really into ketosis.
Okay. So it's better to have more ketones going to the blood than urine that first day, right? Or no?
Yeah, I mean, it's all about timing.
Okay.
So it just depends on where you're at in that stage of fasting. And some people get into ketosis more efficiently and faster because they don't have a ton stored up in their liver, or they're very efficient in burning glucose, or they're very active, so they're burning through it really quickly. So we see athletes they're able to get into ketosis a little bit faster than someone who says like obese or extremely overweight. They may have a harder time getting into ketosis.
Okay.
But that's why, when people start trying to go ketogenic, sometimes it takes a few weeks in order for them to get keto adapted, and that's just because they've trained their body over the course of a few weeks to be able to get into ketosis much faster and more efficiently. So it doesn't take 24 hours of fasting or 72 hours of fasting in order to get them into ketosis. They can do it in 12 hours or 18 hours.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. So let's we're gonna start wrapping things up here a little bit. But before we go, walk us through a day of Dr. May. Since you said you practice intermittent fasting, go ahead and pan out what your day looks like and what kind of foods you're eating, things like that, and maybe even why you're doing things the way you are as well.
Okay. So for me, it's really easy for me to get up in the morning, get going, get out the door. I'll have some black coffee generally and some water. But I normally don't eat until typically around 1 to 1:30, somewhere in that range. And if I'm bringing my own meal, then I'm usually eating, eggs that were cooked in coconut oil, maybe a little kale with it, some, half of an avocado. So it's a lot of protein and fat there. Okay. Sometimes with some of the other docs here, we'll go out to eat and I'll have a really packed, high protein sandwich or something to that effect. But most of the time I'm bringing my own food. It's, eggs and avocado. And then usually, so I'll exercise about 5:36. So when it gets about, 3 o'clock or so, I'll have some carbohydrates. So it's usually a sweet potato or half a sweet potato. I may have a protein shake or something at that point too, just to increase the level of protein. That can be the tricky part of this, is if you're condensing your feeding time into 6 hours, and you're trying to build muscle, and you're trying to get in 100 grams of protein a day, it gets a little challenging to squeeze it all into that little time period. So I'll usually do maybe 1 or 2 protein shakes if I'm in that phase of trying to build up. And then go exercise. I try not to eat too much, within an hour of exercise, just because I don't exercise well with, food in my stomach. I'll get nauseous, or I just don't feel good.
That's sludge.
Yeah. So I might have a pre-workout, before that, but it's just a drink and not something solid. And then, so I'll exercise from about 5:30 to 6:30, go home, have dinner with family about 7. And then again, it'll be some high protein, so we'll have chicken or something like that, along with vegetables, maybe another sweet potato or something like that, or half of one. And then that's it, basically, at that point. So I'm done eating about 7:30-ish, so we're in that range.
Okay.
Yeah, and then preferably just water after that. People think it's amazing too, because when I say stop eating at like 7 or 7:30 or whatever it might be for someone, and then they have a glass of wine or a beer or something like 2 hours after that, like, this doesn't count. Like, that beer or wine counts as calories.
Right.
Actually, it's a lot of like empty calories. So you're getting a lot of calories for little or no nutrients there. So it's like, you can't start your fast until you're done with that beer or wine, and then that's when it starts. But basically, that's most of my days, and I'll do that at least like 5 days a week. So during my work day week, that's what I'm doing, and then the weekends I usually take off, or I might fast, but I'm not holding to the same kind of schedule on the weekends.
Gotcha.
And that's doable for me. I've been able to do it for, like I said, 3 years now. I'm playing around with it, and it just works really well for me. And I've seen benefit as far as body composition, blood sugar, especially. Like, for most of my adult life, I've been in that close to pre-diabetic range, no matter how well I eat or how much I exercise. And since I've been doing this intermittent fasting, my A1C dropped significantly, and it stayed there the last 3 years. So it's been, I'm a big believer in it now. But I think the reason for that is it's all about adaptability. Like, our ability to survive in human history has been predicated on our ability to adapt, right? And so that's why I wrote a little booklet called Keto Adapt, which is we're using ketosis and intermittent fasting as a way to stimulate this adaptive, presence there of being able to, be more resilient stress-wise, and be more resilient with, our ability to, turn over these senescent cells better.
Okay. Is there a place people can go to get your book?
Yeah, you can go on my website, drmaynd.com. And it'll be on there, or Facebook page.
Okay, cool. So before we leave real quick, if I was someone off the street and I said, hey, Dr. May, I want to start intermittent fasting tomorrow, what are the 3 main tips that you would give somebody, like if they wanted to go and start doing intermittent fasting after this video or first thing tomorrow morning, what are the top 3 tips you would give them to help them be successful?
Yeah. So I'd say 1, take it slow. Like, don't try to jump into an 18-6, 5 days a week tomorrow. Okay. Work your way up to it. So start with 12 hours of fasting, and just kind of work your way up over the next few days or weeks up to that 18-6. And just because that's a popular strategy doesn't mean that it's going to work for everybody. Some people do well at 16-8 or whatever. So figure out what works for you, and that you can be compliant with, that kind of fits your schedule better too, whether that's fasting in the first part of the day or in the last part of the day. Like, figure out what works for you, because whatever works for you, you're going to be more compliant with. And this is all about being able to be consistent with it. So figure out what works for you, and then work into that slowly. The next thing would be eat real food, like we talked about. Like, it's just because you're fasting doesn't mean you can get away with just eating junk. Actually, you have to be, I think, more particular about what you eat because of that condensed time feeding period. You really want to try to get lots of dense, nutrient foods, as opposed to dense caloric foods, which would be all that junk food. Fast food is going to be high calories, low nutrients. versus like fruits and vegetables are going to be high nutrients, low calories. So
our moms were right when they said eat your vegetables.
That's right. Eat your vegetables.
Eat your vegetables, people.
That's right. The third one, I don't know. I'd say probably like just give yourself some grace. Like this is something you've got to think like this is a marathon. This is a long kind of term strategy. If you're going to reap the benefits from this, you're going to need to do this for years. Not don't look at it as like a fad diet where you're going to do it for a couple of weeks or a couple of months to lose some weight. Like that shouldn't be the intention here. This should be long-term strategy. So think about it like that. How are you going to implement this long-term? And there will be some days where you just can't stick with the routine because of various variables, and that's okay. Like give yourself some grace, get back on it the next day and get started. Like a lot of times people, when they're on a diet, they break that diet or they cheat, and then this is the whole mind game that they play with themselves. Well, I cheated, so this is off or not, so I'm just going to go like 180 degrees and just do everything I'm not supposed to do, and then do this for the next few days or weeks because I feel so bad about failing on this particular diet. Like get out of that mind game strategy there. It doesn't work. That's why people yo-yo diet. Like I can get anyone to drop 20 pounds in a couple of weeks. It's not going to be safe for you,
right?
And you're going to gain it back plus probably 10-20% on top of that, just because of how we've jacked up your hormone system in the process. So you've got to think long game here, and then give yourself some grace during that time too.
Okay, cool. So 3 tips. If you're going to try intermittent fasting tomorrow, 1. Start off slow. Don't try to start off with a 24-hour fast right off the bat. Start with something like 12 hours. All right, build your way up to 16 and maybe 18, something like that. 2, eat your freaking vegetables, people. Fruits, veggies, whole foods, a little bit of meat. All right, whole foods. Stay out of the aisles, except frozen. If you can have some frozen vegetables and fruits, that's okay too. That's still wholesome. But anyways, after that, stay out of the junk food aisles. And then 3, give yourself some grace. Just because you messed up a little bit doesn't mean it's the end of the world. Get back on track and accomplish your goals. So thank you, Dr. May, for talking to us about intermittent fasting today. I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, please like and comment down below what you liked. If there's any questions you have, please do that. Also, go check out Dr. May's book. What was it called again?
Keto Adapt.
Keto Adapt. You can find it on his website, drmaynd.com, as in naturopathic doctor, nd.com. So drmaynd.com, and tune in next week for some more videos.